High strategist Veltar stood before the massive crystal screen in the war room of the Eternal Harmony. His tall, crystalline body reflected the blue light from dozens of data displays that showed star maps, fleet positions, and intelligence reports. Around him, representatives from 11 other alien species sat in their designated spots, each one convinced they understood everything about warfare. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this part of space for over 3,000 years. They had fought wars against every major species in the galaxy and won them all. Not through brute force, but through careful planning, mathematical precision, and what they called civilized combat. War, to them, was like a game of chess played with starships instead of pieces. The humans have rejected our final warning, Veltar announced to the council. His voice carried the cold certainty that had made him the most feared military mind in the galaxy. They refused to leave the Kepler system. Commander Zixal of the Insectoid Collective clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his species. These humans are even more primitive than we thought. They have only been in space for less than 200 of their years. What can they possibly know about real warfare? The aquatic representative from the depth swimmers, Admiral Gulfa, made bubbling sounds that translated through her watersuit speakers. Our scouts report that human ships are crude and bulky. They build them like floating fortresses instead of proper warships. Their tactics are probably just as backward. Veltar nodded as he pulled up holographic displays showing human military records. The data had been gathered by Zephyrian spies over the past 50 years, ever since humans had first ventured beyond their home solar system. What he saw confirmed what every member of the Galactic Council already believed. Look at their history, Veltar said, gesturing to images of human conflicts. They fight each other constantly. Their wars are messy, wasteful, and completely without honor. They destroy entire cities just to claim territory. They sacrifice thousands of soldiers for tiny advantages. This is not warfare. This is madness. Energy-based Lumina representative, a being of pure light called Bright Star 7, pulsed with colors that indicated amusement. They still use projectile weapons and chemical explosives. How can such a primitive species challenge us? For the past month, the Council had been studying everything they could learn about human military capabilities. The reports all painted the same picture. Humans were aggressive, unpredictable, and wasteful. They seemed to fight without any clear strategy beyond hit the enemy until they stop moving. Their ships were heavily armored but slow. Their weapons were powerful but crude. Their tactics appeared to be based on overwhelming force rather than clever maneuvering. Their largest military vessels carry over 2,000 crew members, reported General Kethra of the Reptilian Scaled Empire. That is completely inefficient. Our ships operate with crews of no more than 300. They waste resources on everything they do. Veltar studied the data more carefully. Human conflicts showed a disturbing pattern. They rarely surrendered. Even when defeat was mathematically certain, they seemed willing to fight until every last soldier was dead rather than accept logical terms of surrender. This was puzzling to the Galactic Council, whose wars typically ended when one side calculated that continued fighting would cost more than surrender. Perhaps their inability to think logically is actually an advantage, suggested Elder Mindwalker, Yevek of the Telepathic Scion Collective. If they cannot calculate when they are beaten, they might continue fighting longer than expected. Impossible, Veltar replied with confidence. No species can win a war through stupidity alone. Once they face a proper military force, following established combat doctrine, they will understand their position and surrender appropriately. The Galactic Council had developed their system of civilized warfare over thousands of years. Wars were fought according to strict rules that all advanced species followed. Battles took place at predetermined locations. Casualties were kept to acceptable minimums. When one side gained a clear mathematical advantage, the other side surrendered, and negotiations began for territorial adjustments. This system had brought peace and stability to their region of space. It had also ensured that the most powerful species, like the Zephyrian Empire, remained in control. Species that tried to fight outside the established rules found themselves facing the combined might of the entire Galactic Council. The humans have established colonies in 17 systems, Veltar continued. Our intelligence indicates they have a total fleet of perhaps 200 warships. We have over 3,000 vessels. The mathematical outcome is obvious. What concerned the council members was not the possibility of losing to humans, but the precedent their defiance might set. If one primitive species could ignore Galactic Council authority, others might try the same thing. The carefully maintained balance of power could be disrupted. We need to make an example of them, declared War Chief Brexitar of the warrior caste. Voranti. A quick, decisive victory that shows the galaxy what happens to species that refuse to follow proper protocols. Veltar agreed. The humans needed to be taught their place in the galactic order, but he wanted to do more than simply defeat them. He wanted to educate them about how real warfare was conducted between civilized species. I propose a demonstration, he announced. We will show the humans how a proper military campaign is conducted. They will learn about strategic positioning, calculated advances, and honorable surrender. When they understand how outmatched they are, they will join the galactic community as junior members. The Council voted unanimously to approve Veltar's plan. They would deploy a fleet of moderate size, perhaps 50 ships, to the Kepler system. The humans would be given every opportunity to surrender gracefully. If they chose to fight, they would receive a lesson in proper military doctrine that would benefit them for generations to come. As the meeting ended, Veltar felt satisfied with the plan. The humans would either submit immediately or learn quickly that their primitive approach to warfare was no match for 3,000 years of military evolution. Either way, the Galactic Council would remain supreme, and another young species would take its proper place in the established order. None of the council members had any idea that they were about to encounter something completely outside their experience. They had studied human technology and human history, but they had never tried to understand what drove humans to fight the way they did. They saw only chaos where humans saw adaptability. They saw waste where humans saw determination. They saw primitive aggression where humans saw the will to win at any cost. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were about to discover that their 3,000 years of experience meant nothing when facing an enemy that didn't follow any of their rules. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance watching the endless stars through the main viewport. His ship was 3 days out from Earth, carrying orders that could change everything for humanity's expansion into space. The message from Colonial Command had been simple. Investigate reports of alien activity in the Kepler system and protect human interests. The Defiance was one of humanity's newest battleships, built with lessons learned from 50 years of exploring a hostile galaxy. At 800 meters long and bristling with weapons, it represented everything humans had learned about surviving in space. The ship carried a crew of 2,000, more than most alien vessels. But Morrison knew every person was essential. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Colonial Authority in the Kepler system," reported Lieutenant Amy Rogers from her position at the communications station. Rogers had been Morrison's tactical officer for 3 years, and he trusted her. "Judgment completely. Put it through," Morrison ordered. The face of Governor Bill Carter appeared on the main screen. Carter looked tired and worried. Behind him, Morrison could see the busy activity of a colonial command center. "Captain Morrison, thank God you're here," Carter said. "We've had contact with aliens. They're calling themselves the Galactic Council, and they're demanding we evacuate all human settlements in this system." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. "What exactly did they say?" "They sent a representative to our main colony 3 days ago, a tall, crystal-looking alien who said humans were trespassing in their space. He gave us formal notice that we have to leave within 30 days or face military action." Commander Rick Barnes, the ship's security chief, stepped forward. Barnes was a former Marine who had seen action in the border wars against pirates. "Did they specify what kind of military action?" "The alien said they would conduct what he called an educational demonstration of proper warfare. He seemed to think we didn't understand how civilized species fight wars." Dr. Lisa Grant, the ship's chief medical officer and xenobiologist, looked up from her datapad. "Captain, I've been reviewing our intelligence files on reported alien contacts. Several species have been encountered by our scout ships over the past 20 years. The pattern is always the same. They approach us with the assumption that we'll automatically accept their authority." Morrison nodded. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" "Our long-range sensors detected approximately 50 alien ships gathering at the edge of the system," Rogers reported. "They're maintaining position about 6 light hours from the main colony. The ships appear to be larger than ours, but we can't get detailed scans at this distance." "50 ships against our 1, Barnes muttered. "Those aren't good odds." "Depends on how you look at it," Morrison replied. He had studied military history his entire career, and he knew that numbers didn't always determine the outcome of a battle. "Have they made any hostile moves?" Governor Carter shook his head. "No, they're just sitting there. The alien representative said they're waiting for us to make what he called the logical choice and evacuate peacefully." Morrison considered the situation. Humanity's expansion into space had always been driven by necessity. Earth was overcrowded, and the colonies represented hope for millions of people. The Kepler system alone housed over 2 million human settlers. Evacuating them would be a massive undertaking, even if they had somewhere to go. "Governor, I need you to send me everything you recorded of this alien contact. Every word, every gesture, every detail you can remember." "Already prepared, Captain. Transmitting now." Morrison watched the recordings carefully. The alien representative was tall and elegant, with crystalline features that seemed to refract light. He spoke in perfect English, but his tone was condescending, like an adult explaining simple concepts to a child. "We understand that your species is new to interstellar politics," the alien had said. "The Galactic Council has established protocols for territorial disputes that prevent unnecessary conflict. Your settlements in this system violate agreements that have maintained peace for over 1,000 years." What struck Morrison was the alien's assumption that humans would simply accept these claims. The representative had presented no evidence for the Galactic Council's authority over the Kepler system. He had offered no negotiation or compromise. He had simply expected humans to obey. "Dr. Grant, what's your assessment of this alien's behavior?" Morrison asked. Grant had been taking notes while watching the recording. His body language suggests complete confidence in his position. He's not threatening us so much as informing us of what he believes is inevitable. I think he genuinely expects us to evacuate without a fight. Why would he think that? Barnes wondered. Because that's probably what every other species has done, Morrison realized. They've built a system where the Galactic Council makes demands and everyone else complies. They've never dealt with humans before. Rogers looked up from her analysis of the alien fleet. Captain, I'm detecting some unusual patterns in their ship formations. They're maintaining perfect geometric spacing, almost like they're performing a parade formation rather than preparing for battle. Morrison nodded. They're not expecting a fight. They think this is just a formality. The captain called a meeting of his senior staff in the main briefing room. Around the table sat his most trusted officers, Rogers, Barnes, Grant, and Chief Engineer Kate Phillips. Morrison had handpicked this crew because they could think creatively under pressure. Here's the situation, Morrison began. We have 50 alien ships demanding that 2 million human colonists abandon their homes. They seem to think we'll just comply because that's what civilized species do. What are our orders from Earth? Phillips asked. Protect human interests and maintain our territorial claims. Colonial Command has made it clear that retreat is not an option. Barnes leaned forward. Captain, I've been thinking about what Dr. Grant said about these aliens expecting automatic compliance. What if their whole military doctrine is based on that assumption? Explain. If they've never faced serious resistance, their tactics might be designed for intimidation rather than actual combat. Those perfect formations Rogers detected could be a weakness rather than a strength. Morrison had been thinking the same thing. Dr. Grant, in your opinion, how would a species develop this kind of attitude toward warfare? They'd have to be the dominant power in their region for a very long time, Grant replied. Long enough that they've forgotten what it's like to face an equal opponent. They've probably been dealing with species that view survival as more important than victory. Whereas humans, Rogers added, have a history of fighting even when the odds are against us. Morrison stood up and walked to the viewports that lined one wall of the briefing room. Outside, the stars looked peaceful, but he knew that appearance was deceptive. Somewhere out there, 50 alien ships waited for humanity to make what their commanders considered the only logical choice. I think we need to send them a message, Morrison said. But not the one they're expecting. Phillips raised an eyebrow. What kind of message? The kind that lets them know humans don't surrender. Just because someone tells us to. Morrison activated the ship's communication system and opened a channel to the alien fleet. He didn't know if they were listening, but he suspected they were. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance to the alien vessels, currently in the Kepler system. You have demanded that human colonists evacuate their lawfully established settlements. We reject this demand. If you want us to leave, you'll have to make us leave. Morrison out. The message was short, simple, and completely different from what the Galactic Council expected to hear. Morrison had just informed the most powerful military force in the galaxy that humanity intended to fight. In the silence that followed, Morrison could see the mix of determination and concern on his officers' faces. They all knew they were about to face something unprecedented in human history. But they also knew that backing down would mean the end of humanity's expansion into space. Well, Barnes said finally, I guess we're about to find out what these aliens really know about warfare. High Strategist Veltar stared at the communication display in disbelief. The human captain's message had been broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in the alien fleet had heard it. Around the command bridge of the Eternal Harmony, his staff exchanged confused glances. "Did he just refuse our authority?" asked Sub-Commander Nixall, his crystalline features flickering with uncertainty. "That's impossible," replied War Analyst Drexton from his position at the tactical station. "No species has ever rejected a formal demand from the Galactic Council. It goes against all established protocols." Veltar had been a military strategist for over 200 years. He had overseen the surrender of 16 different species and the peaceful integration of dozens more into the galactic community. Never in all his experience had he encountered outright defiance of this kind. "Perhaps they misunderstood our message," suggested Communications Officer Yelna. "Their translation systems might have failed to convey the proper meaning." "No," Veltar said slowly. "I monitored their language patterns. The translation was accurate. This Captain Morrison understood exactly what we demanded, and he chose to refuse." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's crystal-based power systems. Every officer present had been trained in the established protocols for dealing with primitive species. Those protocols had been developed over thousands of years and had never failed, until now. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Sub-Commander Nixall. Veltar considered his options. The standard procedure would be to increase the size of his fleet and repeat the demand with greater emphasis. Most species reconsidered their position when faced with overwhelming force. But something about the human captain's tone suggested that additional threats would not be effective. "Open a direct communication channel to the human ship," Veltar ordered. "I want to speak with this Captain Morrison personally." The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the human vessel. Veltar was immediately struck by how different it looked from any warship he had encountered. Where alien ships featured elegant curves and sophisticated displays, the human bridge appeared to be built for function rather than beauty. The walls were thick metal, the control stations looked like they could withstand direct hits, and everything had a solid, heavy appearance. Captain Morrison stood in the center of the bridge, surrounded by his officers. He was smaller than Veltar had expected, but there was something in his posture that suggested complete confidence. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "I assume you're in charge of this fleet," Morrison said. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, commanding officer of the USS Defiance. I am High Strategist Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire speaking for the Galactic Council," Veltar replied. "Captain Morrison, I believe you may have misunderstood our previous communication. We were not making a request. We were informing you of a decision that has already been made by the proper authorities." Morrison's expression didn't change. "I understood perfectly. You want us to abandon our colonies because you say this space belongs to you. My answer is no. Captain, you seem to be laboring under the misconception that you have a choice in this matter. The Galactic Council has maintained order in this region of space for over 3,000 years. We have the authority to regulate territorial disputes between species." "Says who?" Morrison asked bluntly. The question caught Veltar off guard. In his entire career, no one had ever questioned the Galactic Council's authority. It was simply an accepted fact, like gravity or the speed of light. "The authority comes from our position as the dominant military and political force in this sector," Veltar explained patiently. "We have the power to enforce our decisions. So might makes. Right, in other words. That is an overly simplistic interpretation. We maintain peace through the application of superior strategy and technology. Our system prevents the chaos and destruction that would result from unregulated warfare." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. And I suppose all the other species just accepted this arrangement willingly? They recognized the logic of our position. When faced with the choice between destruction and integration into the galactic community, they chose survival. Well, there's your problem, Morrison said. Humans don't always choose survival over principle. Veltar felt a growing sense of frustration. This conversation was unlike any negotiation he had ever conducted. The human captain seemed to be operating from a completely different set of assumptions about how civilized beings should interact. Captain Morrison, let me be more direct. You have one ship. I have 50. You have 2,000 crew members. I have over 30,000. Your weapons technology is centuries behind ours. If you force me to demonstrate the futility of resistance, many of your people will die unnecessarily. Maybe, Morrison replied, but maybe not. Are you seriously suggesting that one primitive warship can defeat an entire Galactic Council fleet? Morrison smiled for the first time since the conversation began. I'm suggesting that you might not know as much about warfare as you think. You do. Veltar felt his crystalline structure flicker with anger. Captain, I have studied military strategy for 2 centuries. I have defeated species far more advanced than yours. Your own military history shows nothing but crude, wasteful conflicts that demonstrate a complete lack of strategic thinking. Our military history, Morrison said slowly, shows that we've been fighting each other for thousands of years and we're still here. That should tell you something about our staying power. It tells me that you are incapable of learning from your mistakes. Or maybe it tells you that we've learned things about warfare that you haven't. The statement was so absurd that Veltar almost laughed. Captain, what could a species that has been in space for less than 2 centuries possibly teach the Galactic Council about military strategy? Morrison's smile grew wider. I guess we'll find out. Veltar decided to try a different approach. Captain, I respect your loyalty to your people, but you have a responsibility to consider their welfare. If you surrender now, your colonists will be relocated to suitable worlds outside our territorial claims. They will be given assistance in establishing new settlements. No one needs to die. And if we don't surrender, then I will be forced to demonstrate why the Galactic Council's authority is absolute. Morrison was quiet for a moment, and Veltar thought he might be reconsidering his position. But when the human captain spoke again, his voice held a note of steel that Veltar had never heard before. Hi, strategist. Let me explain something about humans. We've spent our entire history fighting people who told us we had no choice but to surrender. Sometimes they were right, and we lost. But sometimes they were wrong, and they lost. The thing is, we never know which it's going to be until we try. Captain, this is not some primitive tribal conflict. This is exactly what it is, Morrison interrupted. You want our territory, and you're threatening to take it by force if we don't give it to you willingly. Where I come from, we have a word for that. Conquest. Veltar felt his patience finally run out. Very well, Captain Morrison. You have forced me to proceed with military action. I will give your colonists 24 hours to begin evacuation procedures. After that time, I will begin demonstrating the proper way to conduct warfare between civilized species. Looking forward to it, Morrison replied. Morrison out. The communication ended, leaving Veltar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, but for the first time in his career, Veltar wasn't sure what those orders should be. He had just encountered something completely outside his experience, a species that seemed willing to fight a hopeless battle simply because they refused to accept defeat. Everything in his training told him that such behavior was impossible. No rational being would choose certain destruction over logical surrender. But as he reviewed the conversation, Veltar began to suspect that the humans might not be entirely rational by Galactic Council standards. And for the first time in his long military career, he wondered if that might actually be a disadvantage for his side rather than theirs. Captain Morrison stood in the main briefing room of the USS Defiance, surrounded by his senior officers and a group of specialists who had been working around the clock to analyze the alien fleet. The room was filled with data displays, tactical projections, and intelligence reports that painted a clear picture of what they were facing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, "we have less than 20 hours before the aliens begin their demonstration of proper warfare. I want to know everything we can learn about them before that happens." Lieutenant Amy Rogers stood at the main display, pointing to a three-dimensional map of the alien fleet formation. "We've been monitoring their positions for the past 18 hours. They're maintaining perfect geometric spacing, with their largest ships forming a central core and smaller vessels arranged in supporting rings around them." Commander Rick Barnes studied the formation with the eye of a veteran soldier. "It's beautiful, I'll give them that. But it's also completely predictable. They're not making any effort to disguise their intentions or protect their command structure." Dr. Lisa Grant had spent the day analyzing every scrap of information they had about alien physiology and psychology. "I think their formation reflects their entire approach to conflict. They view warfare as a formal process with established rules and predictable outcomes." Chief Engineer Kate Phillips looked up from her analysis of the alien ship's energy signatures. "Their technology is definitely more advanced than ours in some areas. Their ships appear to be powered by some kind of crystal-based energy system that's incredibly efficient. But there's something strange about their weapons signatures." Morrison leaned forward. "Strange how?" "They're powerful, but they're designed for precision rather than maximum damage. It's like they're built to disable rather than destroy." "That makes sense," Barnes commented. "If they're used to fighting opponents who surrender quickly, they wouldn't need weapons designed for total destruction." Rogers brought up another display showing communication intercepts from the alien fleet. "We've been monitoring their internal communications. Most of it is in languages we can't translate yet, but Dr. Grant has identified some interesting patterns." Grant nodded. "Their command structure appears to be very hierarchical, with all decisions flowing from this high strategist Veltar. There's very little independent communication between individual ships. It's like they're operating as a single unit rather than a fleet of independent vessels." Morrison considered this information. Everything they had learned suggested that the aliens were accustomed to fighting a very different kind of war than humans were prepared for. The question was whether that would be an advantage or a disadvantage. "What about their expectations?" Morrison asked. "What do we think they're planning to do?" "Based on their behavior patterns," Grant replied, "I believe they intend to demonstrate their superior technology and tactics, expecting us to surrender once we understand how outmatched we are." Barnes smiled grimly. "Then they're going to be disappointed." Morrison walked to the viewports and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 50 alien ships waited for humanity to make what their commanders considered the only logical choice. But Morrison had been thinking about the conversation with Veltar, and he was beginning to understand something important about their opponents. "I think we're approaching this wrong," Morrison said. "We're treating this like a conventional military engagement, but that's not what this is." Rogers looked confused. "What do you mean, Captain?" "Think about what Veltar said. He's not trying to destroy us. He's trying to educate us. He wants to show us how civilized species conduct warfare so we'll understand our place in the galactic order. Phillips frowned. That doesn't sound like good news for us. Actually, it might be the best news we could get, Morrison replied. If they're more interested in teaching us a lesson than destroying us, they'll probably hold back their most devastating weapons. They want us to survive the experience so we can benefit from their wisdom. Barnes began to see where Morrison was going. And if they're holding back, then they're not fighting at full capacity. They're conducting a demonstration, not a battle. Grant looked thoughtful. But, Captain, even a demonstration from their advanced technology could be devastating to our ship. Morrison nodded. Which is why we're not going to fight the kind of battle they're expecting. He turned back to his officers, and they could see a plan forming in his mind. Everything we've learned tells us that these aliens have never faced serious resistance. Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation and overwhelming technological superiority. They expect their opponents to either surrender immediately or fight according to established rules. Rogers was beginning to understand. So we don't follow their rules. Exactly. We fight like humans, not like the civilized species they're used to dealing with. Morrison activated the room's main display and brought up tactical information about both fleets. Here's what we know about their formation. It's designed to project maximum power while minimizing their own casualties. Their flagship is in the center, protected by layers of supporting vessels. It's textbook tactics for fighting, an opponent who will retreat when the odds become impossible. Barnes studied the display. But if we don't retreat, then their perfect formation becomes a weakness instead of a strength. Phillips looked concerned. Captain, you're not seriously considering charging directly into the center of their fleet? Morrison's smile was answer enough. Sir, that's suicide. Rogers protested. Their ships outgun us and outnumber us 50-1. Only if we fight their kind of battle, Morrison replied. But what if we don't? He brought up historical data from human conflicts, showing battle after battle where smaller forces had defeated larger ones through unconventional tactics. The aliens have studied our military history, but they've misunderstood what they were seeing. They think our willingness to take casualties is a weakness. They think our unpredictable tactics are evidence of poor planning. Grant was beginning to see the logic. But those same qualities could be advantages against an opponent who's never faced them before. Morrison nodded. The Defiance was built to fight in close quarters against multiple opponents. Our armor is designed to absorb punishment while we deliver it. Our weapons are built for maximum damage, not precision strikes. Barnes was warming to the idea. And our crew is trained for boarding actions and ship-to-ship combat, things these aliens probably haven't seen in centuries. Morrison looked around, the room at his officers. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be the most dangerous thing any of us has ever done. We're going to charge into the middle of 50 enemy ships and try to break their entire fleet formation through sheer audacity. Phillips shook her head. Captain, even if we could somehow damage their flagship, we'd never survive the counterattack from the rest of their fleet. Maybe not, Morrison admitted, but we don't have to survive. We just have to show them that humans don't fight the way they expect. Rogers looked at the tactical display again. Sir, if we could somehow get close to their command ship, we'd be in range for boarding actions, Barnes finished. These aliens have probably never dealt with armed humans fighting room to room inside their own ships. Morrison could see understanding dawning on his officers' faces. They were beginning to see the possibility he had envisioned. It wasn't a plan for victory in any conventional sense. It was a plan to show the Galactic Council that humanity could not be educated, intimidated, or easily conquered. I want all departments to prepare for close-quarters combat, Morrison ordered. Engineering, I want maximum power to engines and forward shields. Security, prepare boarding teams with full combat gear. Medical, set up emergency treatment stations throughout the ship. As his officers dispersed to carry out their orders, Morrison remained in the briefing room, staring at the tactical display. In a few hours, the USS Defiance would charge into the heart of an alien fleet and attempt something that no civilized species had ever tried. Morrison had no idea whether they would survive the attempt, but he was certain that the aliens were about to learn something about human warfare that their 3,000 years of experience had never taught them. The bridge of the USS Defiance hummed with quiet tension as Captain Morrison watched the countdown timer reach its final minutes. Around him, his crew moved with the practiced efficiency of soldiers preparing for battle. Every station was manned, every system was ready, and every person aboard knew that they were about to attempt something unprecedented in human history. "All stations report ready, Captain," Lieutenant Rogers announced from her position at the tactical station. Her voice was steady, but Morrison could see the determination in her eyes. "Engineering reports all systems at maximum efficiency," added Chief Phillips over the intercom. "We've got full power to engines and shields, and all backup systems are online." Commander Barnes spoke from the security station. "All Marine units are suited up and ready for boarding operations. Weapons are loaded and distributed throughout the ship." Morrison nodded, taking one last look at the tactical display that showed the alien fleet. The 50 ships maintained their perfect formation, waiting for humanity to make what High Strategist Veltar considered the only logical choice. They had no idea what was coming. "Dr. Grant, what's the status on alien communications?" Morrison asked. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, demanding to speak with our colonial authorities about evacuation procedures," Grant replied. "High Strategist Veltar appears to be growing impatient with our lack of response." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "Let's give him something to respond to. Open a channel to the alien flagship." The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the Eternal Harmony. Veltar stood in the center, surrounded by his crystalline officers. His posture radiated confidence and barely controlled irritation. "Captain Morrison," Veltar began, "your 24-hour deadline has expired. I assume you are ready to discuss evacuation procedures." "Actually," Morrison replied, "I wanted to thank you for the educational opportunity you're about to provide." Veltar's crystalline features flickered with confusion. "I do not understand." "You said you were going to demonstrate proper warfare to us. We're looking forward to learning from your example." "Captain, this is not a game. If you do not begin immediate evacuation of your colonies, I will be forced to commence military operations." Morrison's expression grew serious. "High Strategist, you've made two critical errors in your assessment of this situation." "And what might those be?" "First, you assumed that because we're new to interstellar politics, we don't understand warfare. Second, you assumed that we would fight according to your rules." Before Veltar could respond, Morrison cut the connection and turned to his crew. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage a superior enemy force using tactics they have never encountered. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and show them what humans are capable of when we fight for our freedom." Morrison took his position in the captain's chair and looked around the bridge one final time. His officers were ready, his ship was ready, and somewhere behind them, 2 million human colonists were counting on them to defend their new homes. Helm set course for the center of the alien. Formation, maximum speed. The USS Defiance surged forward, its massive engines pushing the 800-meter battleship toward the alien fleet at a velocity that shocked the watching enemy. On the bridge of the Eternal Harmony, Veltar stared at his tactical displays, in disbelief. "Sir, the human ship is moving directly toward our formation," reported his tactical officer. "Current speed is... This cannot be correct." "What is their speed?" Veltar demanded. "They are approaching at nearly maximum sublight velocity. At this rate, they will reach our outer perimeter in less than 10 minutes. Veltar studied the tactical projection, trying to understand what the humans were doing. "Are they attempting to ram our ships?" "Unknown, sir. Their course will take them directly through our formation toward our position." This was completely outside Veltar's experience. In 3,000 years of Galactic Council military history, no enemy had ever charged directly into the center of a superior force. It was tactically impossible, strategically insane, and completely suicidal. "All ships, maintain formation," Veltar ordered. "Prepare to demonstrate standard interception procedures." Aboard the Defiance, Morrison watched as the alien ships began to maneuver into what was obviously a textbook defensive formation. They moved with elegant precision, each vessel taking its assigned position in a pattern designed to create overlapping fields of fire that would destroy any attacking ship long before it could reach their command vessel. "They're following their training manual," Rogers observed. "Every ship moving exactly where we'd expect them to." "That's what I was counting on," Morrison replied. "Barnes, are your boarding teams ready?" "Standing by, Captain. The moment we get close enough to that flagship, we'll show them what human Marines can do in close quarters." Morrison could see that some of his crew were struggling with the reality of what they were about to attempt. Charging into the heart of an enemy fleet was not standard Earth-Navy doctrine, but Morrison had studied enough military history to know that sometimes the impossible became possible when your enemy wasn't prepared for it. "Sir, the aliens are hailing us," Dr. Grant reported. "Put them through." Veltar's image appeared on the screen, his crystalline features now showing clear signs of agitation. "Captain Morrison, your current course is suicide. You cannot possibly survive an attack against our entire fleet." "You're probably right," Morrison admitted, "but we're going to try anyway." "This is madness. No rational being would attempt such a hopeless assault." Morrison's eyes hardened. "High strategist, that's the first thing you've said that I completely agree with. This is madness by your standards, but we're not fighting by your standards. You will be destroyed long before you reach our formation." "Maybe, but maybe not. The thing about humans is, we've never been very good at calculating odds. We tend to try things that are impossible, and sometimes they work out." Veltar was clearly struggling to understand human logic. "Captain, I am offering you one final opportunity to surrender. Your ship will be treated with honor, your crew will be spared, and your colonists will be relocated safely." "Counteroffer," Morrison replied. "You withdraw from this system, acknowledge human territorial claims, and will pretend this whole thing never happened." The silence on the alien bridge was telling. Veltar had never received a counteroffer from a species he was in the process of conquering. "Captain Morrison, you are about to face the combined firepower of 50 advanced warships. Your single vessel cannot possibly—" Morrison cut him off. "High strategist, in about 5 minutes, you're going to learn why humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years and are still here. We don't surrender because the odds are bad. We fight harder." The communication ended, leaving Veltar staring at tactical displays that showed the human ship continuing its impossible charge toward his fleet. Around him, his officers waited for orders that would deal with a situation none of them had ever encountered. For the first time in his long military career, High Strategist Veltar began to wonder if the Galactic Council's 3,000 years of experience might not be enough to handle humanity. On the bridge of the Defiance, Morrison watched the alien fleet growing larger on the main screen. In a few minutes, they would enter weapons range and discover whether human audacity could overcome superior technology and numbers. "All hands, prepare for combat," Morrison announced. "Let's show them how humans fight." The first alien weapons fire lit up space around the USS Defiance like deadly fireworks. Captain Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under the impact of energy beams designed to disable rather than destroy. The alien weapons were precise, powerful, and completely inadequate for dealing with a human battleship built to absorb punishment. "Shields holding at 80%, reported Chief Phillips from Engineering. "Their weapons are designed for surgical strikes, not sustained bombardment. We can take this." Morrison watched the tactical display as more alien ships opened fire. The Galactic Council fleet was following standard doctrine, concentrating their fire to overwhelm the Defiance's defenses and force a quick surrender. What they hadn't expected was a ship built to Earth's military specifications, where survival in combat meant being able to take damage and keep fighting. "Return fire," Morrison ordered. "Target their outer ring ships. Show them what our weapons can do." Lieutenant Rogers coordinated the Defiance's response, and the alien fleet got their first taste of human military philosophy. Where alien weapons were precise and efficient, human weapons were designed for maximum destruction. The Defiance's railguns and particle cannons tore through alien shield systems with brutal effectiveness. "Direct hit on their lead escort vessel," Rogers reported with satisfaction. "Their shields are down and they're venting atmosphere." On the bridge of the Eternal Harmony, Veltar watched in shock as one of his ships was crippled by a single volley from the human vessel. The damage was far beyond what he had expected from primitive human technology. "How is this possible?" demanded Sub-Commander Nixall. "Our intelligence reports indicated that human weapons were inferior to ours." "They are inferior in precision and efficiency," replied War Analyst Drexton. "But they appear to be designed for maximum destructive potential rather than surgical strikes." Veltar studied the tactical display as the human ship continued its charge through his formation. Two more of his vessels had been forced to withdraw after taking severe damage from human weapons. This was not how civilized warfare was supposed to proceed. All ships increase firepower and concentrate on their propulsion systems, Veltar ordered. "We must stop their advance before they reach effective range." But the USS Defiance continued forward, its massive bulk absorbing energy blast after energy blast while returning fire that shattered alien formations. The ship's armor was scarred and smoking, but its weapons remained operational and its engines continued to drive it toward the heart of the alien fleet. "We're taking heavy damage to secondary systems," reported Chief Phillips. "But primary systems are still operational. These alien weapons just don't pack enough punch to stop us quickly." Morrison nodded grimly. "That's because they're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to disable us so they can capture our ship and crew intact. They want to study us, not kill us." Commander Barnes spoke from the security station. "Captain, we're approaching optimal range for boarding operations. I have Marine team standing by." Morrison looked at the tactical display. The Defiance was now deep within the alien formation, surrounded by enemy ships but somehow still intact. The alien weapons continued to fire, but their precision strikes were proving ineffective against human engineering designed for brutal combat. "Sir, the aliens are trying to box us in," Rogers reported. "They're repositioning their ships to surround us completely." "Perfect," Morrison replied. "That puts their flagship within boarding range. Barnes, prepare your teams." Morrison opened a ship-wide communication channel. "All hands, this is the captain. We have successfully penetrated the enemy formation and are now in position to demonstrate human combat tactics. Marines, prepare for boarding operations. All other personnel, maintain your stations and show these aliens what human determination looks like." On the alien flagship, Veltar was receiving damage reports from across his fleet. 7 ships had been forced to withdraw, 3 more were operating at reduced capacity, and the human vessel continued to advance despite taking fire from dozens of weapons. "Sir, they're approaching our position," reported the tactical officer. "Recommend we withdraw to maintain safe distance." "Absolutely not," Veltar replied firmly. "The flagship does not retreat from a single enemy vessel. Increase defensive. Fire and prepare for—" His words were cut off as the USS Defiance suddenly changed course, swinging around to approach the Eternal Harmony from an unexpected angle. The human ship had been charging straight through the alien formation, but now it was maneuvering like a fighter craft despite its massive size. "They're trying to get alongside us," warned Subcommander Nixall. "Sir, I recommend evasive maneuvers." Veltar hesitated. In 3,000 years of Galactic Council military operations, no enemy had ever attempted to board a flagship. The very idea was unthinkable. Ships were destroyed at long range through superior firepower and tactical positioning. Physical boarding was something that happened only in ancient historical records. That moment of hesitation was all Captain Morrison needed. The USS Defiance pulled alongside the Eternal Harmony, and suddenly the space between the two ships erupted with activity that the aliens had never seen before. "Boarding pods away," reported Commander Barnes. "Marines are crossing to the enemy ship." Morrison watched as dozens of armored figures launched themselves across the gap between ships, using personal thruster packs and magnetic anchors to attach to the alien vessel's hull. The sight of armed humans cutting through their hull and entering their ship sent shock waves through the alien fleet. "Sir, enemy soldiers are boarding our ship," reported Nixall in a voice filled with disbelief. "They're cutting through our outer hull." Veltar stared at his displays, trying to process what was happening. "That's impossible. No civilized species conducts boarding operations against active warships." "Sir, they're inside our ship. Multiple breach points on decks 7 through 12. Morrison smiled as he listened to Commander Barnes coordinate the boarding operation. "Teams Alpha and Beta are securing the main corridors. Team Gamma is moving toward what appears to be their command section. The aliens don't seem to know how to respond to close-quarters combat." Dr. Grant looked up from her analysis of alien communications. "Captain, I'm monitoring their internal channels. They're in complete panic. They keep asking each other what to do about armed invaders inside the ship. I don't think they have protocols for this situation." Morrison could understand their confusion. The Galactic Council had developed their military doctrine around long-range engagements between technologically sophisticated opponents. They had never considered the possibility of humans with plasma rifles fighting room by room inside their ships. "Barnes, what's your status?" Morrison asked. "We've secured most of the outer sections of their ship, Captain. Light resistance, but they don't seem trained for close-quarters combat. Their personal weapons are designed for stunning rather than killing, and their armor is lightweight." They're not equipped for this kind of fighting. Morrison could see the alien fleet beginning to falter as word of the boarding operation spread. Ships that had been maintaining perfect formation were now breaking ranks, trying to understand how to deal with an enemy that was actually inside their flagship. "Sir, incoming communication from the alien commander," Dr. Grant reported. Morrison smiled. "Put him through." Veltar's image appeared on the screen, but his usual confidence was gone. Behind him, Morrison could see alien crew members running, back and forth, clearly dealing with an emergency they didn't understand. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, his voice strained, "you must order your soldiers to withdraw immediately. This kind of barbaric assault is not acceptable under any recognized rules of warfare." Morrison's smile grew wider. "Hi, strategist. I thought you wanted to educate us about proper military tactics. Consider this our contribution to your education. This is not warfare. This is piracy." "This is human warfare," Morrison corrected. "And you're about to learn why we've been so successful at it." Commander Barnes moved through the corridors of the alien flagship with practiced efficiency, his Marines advancing room by room through sections of the ship that had never been designed for armed conflict. The eternal harmony was a thing of beauty, with crystal walls and elegant curves that reflected light in patterns that might have been artistic under different circumstances. But beauty meant nothing in close-quarters combat. "Team Alpha, report," Barnes spoke into his communicator, as his squad rounded another corner in the alien ship's maze-like interior. "We've secured the engineering section, Commander," came the reply from Sergeant Collins. "The aliens here don't seem to know what to do with us. They keep trying to negotiate instead of fighting." Barnes nodded grimly. "Team Beta, what's your status?" "We've reached what looks like their main computer core," reported Corporal Watson. "The aliens are barricaded behind some kind of energy barrier, but they're broadcasting surrender messages instead of organizing resistance." Barnes could understand their confusion. Everything about this ship was designed for long-range warfare between civilized opponents. The corridors were wide and open, perfect for evacuations but terrible for defensive fighting. The doors were transparent crystal that provided no cover. Even the alien crew quarters were designed for comfort rather than security. "Commander Barnes." "To Captain Morrison," Barnes said, activating his communication link to the Defiance. "We've penetrated their ship's main systems. The aliens don't seem to have any training for repelling boarders." Back on the bridge of the USS Defiance, Captain Morrison listened to the reports with satisfaction. Around him, his crew continued to coordinate the battle that was rapidly becoming a rout. The alien fleet's perfect formation had collapsed as ships broke ranks to try to assist their flagship. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from multiple alien vessels," reported Lieutenant Rogers. "At least 12 ships are requesting permission to withdraw from the engagement." Dr. Grant looked up from her analysis of alien communications. "Captain, I'm monitoring increasing panic across their fleet. They keep referring to our boarding operation as impossible and unprecedented. I don't think they know how to respond to our tactics." Morrison nodded. The aliens had made the same mistake that many of humanity's enemies had made throughout history. They had assumed that superior technology and numbers guaranteed victory. They had never considered that their opponents might refuse to fight according to established rules. "Captain Morrison," came Commander Barnes's voice over the intercom. "We've reached their command section. High Strategist Veltar is requesting permission to surrender his flagship." Morrison smiled. "Put me through to him directly." The main screen flickered and showed the alien commander's bridge, but it looked very different than it had an hour earlier. Several crystal panels were dark, alien crew members were huddled at their stations, and in the center of it all stood Commander Barnes, with a squad of human marines. High Strategist Veltar stood with his hands raised in what was obviously a gesture of surrender. His crystalline features no longer reflected confidence and authority. Instead, he looked like someone whose entire understanding of the universe had been shattered. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I formally surrender my flagship and request safe passage for my crew." Morrison studied the alien commander for a moment before responding. "High Strategist, I believe you had something you wanted to teach us about proper warfare." "I was wrong," Veltar admitted. "Everything I understood about military strategy, everything the Galactic Council has learned over 3,000 years, none of it prepared us for this." "What exactly is this?" Morrison asked. Veltar gestured helplessly at the human marines surrounding him. "You fight like savages. You charge into impossible odds. You board enemy ships in the middle of battle. You seem completely willing to die rather than surrender. No civilized species conducts warfare this way." Morrison's expression grew serious. "High Strategist, let me explain something about humans. We didn't become civilized by accepting other people's rules about how we should fight. We became civilized by winning enough battles to earn the right to make our own rules." The truth of Morrison's words was evident in the tactical displays that showed the alien fleet in complete disarray. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for thousands of years were now scattered across the system, their crews struggling to understand how a single human vessel had destroyed their military doctrine in less than 2 hours. "Sir, incoming. Communication from the alien fleet," Dr. Grant reported. "It's a general surrender signal." Morrison looked at the tactical display one more time. Of the 50 ships that had entered the system to teach humanity about proper warfare, 12 had been damaged or destroyed, 15 were requesting permission to withdraw, and the remainder were broadcasting surrender signals. "Accept their surrender," Morrison ordered. "But I want to make something clear to their entire fleet." Morrison activated ship-wide communications and broadcast on all frequencies so that every alien vessel could hear his words. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ship Defiance to all Galactic Council vessels. You came here to demonstrate proper warfare to humanity. Instead, you've learned something about how humans fight when our freedom is threatened." Morrison paused, making sure his words were being translated and transmitted to every ship in the alien fleet. "You expected us to surrender because your technology is superior and your numbers are greater, but you made a critical error in your calculations. You assumed that warfare is about technology and numbers. For humans, warfare is about will. And our will to remain free is stronger than your will to make us submit." High Strategist Veltar listened to Morrison's words with the expression of someone learning a painful lesson. "Captain Morrison, what are your terms for our surrender?" Morrison considered the question carefully. He could demand the withdrawal of all alien ships from human space. He could insist on territorial concessions or technological transfers. But he realized that none of those things would accomplish what really needed to be done. "My terms are simple," Morrison replied. "You will return to the Galactic Council and inform them that humanity does not recognize their authority over us. We will defend our territory against any force that tries to take it from us, regardless of how superior they believe themselves to be." "And if the Council sends a larger fleet?" Veltar asked. Morrison's smile was cold. "Then they'll learn the same lesson you just learned. except it will be more expensive for them. Veltar nodded slowly. Captain, I must ask you something. How did you know that our tactics would be ineffective against your ship? I didn't, Morrison admitted. But I knew that if we fought the kind of battle you expected, we would lose. So we fought the kind of battle you didn't expect. But you were willing to risk your ship and crew on such uncertainty. Morrison looked around his bridge at the officers who had followed him into an impossible battle and emerged victorious. High strategist, that's what humans do. We take risks that seem impossible to others because sometimes the impossible is the only way to win. As the alien fleet began its withdrawal from the Kepler system, Morrison reflected on what had just happened. Humanity had won its first interstellar war, not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through the simple refusal to accept defeat. The Galactic Council had learned that their 3,000 years of military experience meant nothing when facing an enemy that wouldn't follow their rules. And somewhere in the depths of space, word was already spreading that a new power had emerged, one that fought by its own rules and answered to no authority but its own will to remain free. Captain Morrison had kept his promise to show the aliens what humans were capable of when they fought for their freedom. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to learn the same lesson. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler, Captain Morrison stood in the diplomatic chambers aboard the orbital station above New Geneva, one of humanity's most important colony worlds. Around the circular table sat representatives from dozens of species, but the atmosphere was very different from the arrogant confidence the Galactic Council had displayed before their encounter with human warfare. High strategist Veltar was present, but he no longer wore the insignia of supreme military. Command! The crystalline alien looked smaller somehow, his authority diminished by the knowledge that 3,000 years of Galactic Council doctrine had been shattered in a single battle. Ambassador Paul Stewart, humanity's chief diplomatic representative, sat at Morrison's right side. Stewart had spent the past 3 months negotiating with species across the galaxy, and the results had been remarkable. Word of the human victory had spread faster than anyone had expected, and the carefully maintained balance of galactic power was crumbling. The Kepler incident has created significant changes throughout our region of space, announced Elder Mindwalker Yevek of the Scion Collective. 7 species have formally withdrawn from Galactic Council authority. 12 others are demanding renegotiation of their territorial agreements. Commander Zixal of the Insectoid Collective clicked his mandibles nervously. The humans have demonstrated that Galactic Council military supremacy was overestimated. Our own military analysts have concluded that human combat doctrine could be effective against any of our traditional forces. Morrison listened to the reports with interest. The battle in the Kepler system had accomplished far more than just defending human colonies. It had shown the galaxy that the Galactic Council's authority was not absolute, and that message had resonated with species that had spent centuries accepting subordinate positions in the galactic hierarchy. Dr. Lisa Grant, now serving as humanity's chief xenobiological advisor, looked up from her datapad. Captain, we've received requests from 17 different species asking for assistance in developing their own defense capabilities. They want to learn human military tactics. Lieutenant Amy Rogers, recently promoted to captain and given command of her own vessel, spoke from her position at the communications station. Sir, we're also receiving requests for mutual defense agreements. These species want protection from potential Galactic Council retaliation. Morrison nodded. The Battle of Kepler had proven that human tactics could defeat supposedly superior alien technology, but it had also demonstrated something more important. It had shown that the will to fight for freedom was more powerful than the desire to maintain order through intimidation. Admiral Gulfa of the Depth Swimmers made bubbling sounds that translated as reluctant respect. The humans have accomplished something that was considered impossible. They have forced the Galactic Council to acknowledge equals rather than subjects. Veltar finally spoke, his voice carrying none of its former authority. Captain Morrison, the Galactic Council has authorized me to make a formal proposal. Morrison leaned forward with interest. What kind of proposal? The Council is prepared to recognize human territorial claims and grant humanity full membership in the galactic community. In exchange, we request that humans share their military innovations with Council forces. Morrison almost laughed. Even in defeat, the aliens were trying to find a way to maintain their position of dominance. They wanted to learn human tactics, so they could use them to control other species. Veltar, I think you're still missing the point, Morrison replied. We didn't fight the Battle of Kepler so we could join your club. We fought it so we could remain free to make our own choices. Ambassador Stewart leaned forward. High strategist. Humanity appreciates the offer, but we have no interest in membership in an organization based on the domination of weaker species by stronger ones. Then what do you propose? Asked Bright Star 7 of the Lumina, pulsing with colors that indicated confusion. Morrison stood and walked to the chamber's main display, bringing up a star map that showed the current political situation in their region of space. Red zones indicated areas still under Galactic Council control, yellow zones showed species demanding independence, and green zones marked territories that had declared neutrality. We propose a new system, Morrison announced. One based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical domination. Species that want to cooperate can form voluntary alliances. Species that want to remain independent can do so without interference. General Kethra of the Scaled Empire hissed softly. That is chaos. Without central authority, there will be constant warfare between competing species. Commander Barnes, now serving as humanity's military liaison, smiled grimly. General, there's already constant warfare. The difference is that now species can choose whether to fight for freedom or for submission. Morrison brought up another display showing communication intercepts from across the galaxy. In the past 3 months, we've monitored 47 different conflicts between species and Galactic Council forces. Your system isn't preventing war, it's causing it. Dr. Grant added her analysis. Our studies indicate that most species joined the Galactic Council not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. Fear is not a stable foundation for lasting peace. Veltar studied the data with the expression of someone whose world view was being systematically demolished. But without central coordination, how do you prevent the strong from exploiting the weak? Morrison's answer was simple. You make sure the weak aren't defenseless, Captain. Rogers elaborated. Humanity is prepared to offer defensive assistance to any species that requests it. Not to control them, but to help them defend themselves. Elder Mindwalker Yevek leaned forward with interest. You would share your military knowledge freely with species that want to use it to defend their freedom, Morrison confirmed, but not with species that want to use it to dominate others. The implications of Morrison's offer rippled around the conference table. The aliens were beginning to understand that humanity was proposing something fundamentally different from the Galactic Council system. Instead of one dominant power controlling everyone else, Morrison was suggesting a galaxy where multiple powers balanced each other. Veltar made one final attempt to salvage the old system. Captain Morrison, surely you must understand the value of stability. The Galactic Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years. You've maintained the absence of open warfare, Morrison corrected. That's not the same thing as peace. True peace comes when people are free to make their own choices, not when they're too afraid to resist oppression. Ambassador Stewart stood to address the entire assembly. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, humanity extends an invitation to join us in building a new kind of galactic community, one based on voluntary cooperation, mutual respect, and the right of every species to determine its own destiny. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species announced their withdrawal from Galactic Council authority and their desire to explore this new arrangement. Even some of the Council's former enforcers began expressing interest in alternative approaches to galactic governance. As the conference ended and representatives dispersed to carry word of the new arrangement to their homeworlds, Morrison reflected on how much had changed since the Battle of Kepler. Humanity had entered interstellar politics as a minor species facing overwhelming odds, but by refusing to accept those odds, they had changed the entire balance of galactic power. Captain Rogers approached Morrison as the last of the alien delegates departed. "Sir, do you think this new system will actually work?" Morrison looked out at the stars through the station's main viewport. Somewhere out there, dozens of species were beginning to explore what freedom might mean for them. Some would succeed, others would fail, but all of them would have the chance to try. "Amy, I don't know if it will work," Morrison admitted. "But I know the old system was based on fear and domination, and that was never going to last forever. At least now, species have a choice." Dr. Grant joined them at the viewport. "The psychological profiles I've developed suggest that most species in this region never wanted to be part of the Galactic Council hierarchy. They just didn't see any alternative." Morrison nodded. "Sometimes the most important thing you can do is show people that alternatives exist." As the USS Defiance prepared to depart for its next assignment, Morrison thought about the message humanity had sent to the galaxy. It wasn't that humans were invincible or that their technology was superior. The message was simpler and more powerful than that. The message was that freedom was worth fighting for, even against impossible odds, and that sometimes when you refuse to accept defeat, the impossible became possible. The Galactic Council had claimed to understand war, but they had never understood the most important thing about human warfare. Humans didn't fight to win battles. They fought to win the right to remain free. And in a galaxy full of species that had forgotten what freedom meant, that lesson was more valuable than any weapon or technology humanity could have shared. The new galactic order was just beginning, and Captain Morrison knew that there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in 3,000 years, those challenges would be faced by free being.